as much as it felt unnatural and like I was deviating from a path that I had been on, I felt like it was now or never. And if you ever find yourself in that moment, now or never, I need to either take this gamble or I'll regret it for the rest of my life. You need to do that thing.
For many people in the world, there is a moment of clarity when you see the world differently than you saw it previously. Those are the moments when we wake up to life. I'm Rabbi Josh Bennett, and this is Waking Up to Life, a podcast about those moments. Today, I'm so excited to welcome an old friend onto the podcast. I have Dan Hacker, an artist formerly known as Muzzy Bear in the EDM world. And Dan, it's so good to have you back in my office in the studio on the podcast.
It's so good to see you. Yeah, I feel like every time we see each other, it's, you're one of my oldest friends. Here we are.
I love it. And to be fair, it's important for me to explain, Dan grew up here at Temple Israel, was part of our Monday night school, our youth group. His family has been deeply involved in the congregation. Dan, you left the community for a while and found your way into the music industry, and it wasn't exactly what your family and you planned for yourself. So tell us about that moment in changing your life.
Yeah. Well, I grew up just like a lot of other people in the Metro Detroit community, Jewish community, and really just the American youth. I feel like, you grow up in this kind of, well, my job is I go to school, and then after that, my job is I go to college, and then after that, my job is getting a job, doing something with a degree that I earned in college or not. But school, more school, job, family, kids, that's life. And it's beautiful. But mine kind of shifted because I was always really interested in music. I was the kid in the band at Temple. I was the kid in the band at school, and always, I was the music guy at Tamarack. And I got to college and realized that my identity was really based around music. And, I didn't really have other people that were pursuing that on a seriously deep level. And I met my collaborator, Grizz, right when I get to East Lansing, right when I get to Michigan State, which again is like this culmination of 18 years of growth and learning and school and busting my tuchus for grades. And pretty soon after we get together, the music thing starts taking off. His music's going viral on the internet. We're playing shows. It was like boom, boom, boom. And then a moment came to me where I remember I woke up in the middle of the day, or, I woke up in the middle of the semester, and I called my mom, and, I had started being busy with gigs, and I was like, Mom, I don't want to be here anymore. I can't do this. And I was crying, and I was like, I'd feel bad because I feel like I'm failing. Like I'm failing you and Dad and your hard work to get me here. But it's not the path that I'm meant to walk. I don't know what it is. Like, I just feel called to divert from this path. And it was a bit of a leap. I mean, I still struggled, for a couple years, and it took some time to get to where that was my full-time job, like touring, 5 days a week, 4 days a week for 8 years leading up to the pandemic. And I really think, like, had I stayed in school and kept doing that and didn't leave when I did, that none of that would have happened.
So I'm just imagining you sitting in the culmination of all of your life's dreams at Michigan State. You're pursuing the path.
Yeah.
And the whole world shifts for you almost overnight. So what did that feel like? I know you talked about the tears, the guilt, the suggestion that you weren't making it the way you were supposed to be making it, but what was going on inside your brain that drove you to really pursue that?
There was, growing up, I was always the pretty high achieving. I was like B plus A average student. I was in the plays outside of school. I never missed class. I was doing after school activities, and I was like very seriously on the path. I wasn't really getting into trouble. Like I didn't party on the weekends. I played Halo with my friends. Like that was my
Video game was your vice.
Video game was my vice, and still is in many ways. But yeah, I got to college, and it was my freshman year. I kind of realized like, oh, I'm doing a lot more than just going to class. I'm skipping class to work on music with my friends, and I'm going from East Lansing to Detroit to visit our other friends to work on music for a couple hours, like literally driving an hour to work on music for 3 hours to drive back an hour and getting back at 4 a.m. And I have class at 7:30. And I was like, well, I'm definitely not going to that class. I had never failed a class, and I found myself failing this 8 a.m. class just because I hadn't been able to go 4 or 5 times, like the attendance policy. And I remember that moment of just complete, utter failure. And yes, it was at the, it was in this whole grading system, and like, who says if you fail a class, you're failing at life? But I felt like...
Right, it doesn't matter what the reality is. It matters what was going on inside of you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, though, on the one hand, you're quote-unquote failing life according to the expected path.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you are becoming incredibly successful as a touring musician. And when we talk about touring for 9 years, we're talking about international touring, national touring, events. So at the same time that you were failing one thing,
yeah,
you were also succeeding incredibly in another. What did that do to you?
Yeah, I mean, there was, and even again, like this is probably a couple years before things really started to take off. I think we played Red Rocks for the first time in 2015. And so this would have been 2012. And I had already been like, I'm going to Chicago on the weekends to play shows. Every show that we play together is going immaculately. So I have all of these signs from the universe saying, keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this. And I'm feeling really good about it. And I'm making all these friends that are doing the things that I didn't realize people did, like pursuing art and music and graphic design and, unconventional things. But at the same time, my internal programming is, well, this isn't going to work out because nothing ever works out with this. This doesn't work out for anyone. And even I had this huge imposter syndrome because I felt like I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be. It felt like such a pull towards it. But my internal kind of programming was saying, I don't know, Dan, is this what you're supposed to be doing? Is this what, and like, there's this all the time.
All right. So I want to stop you for a minute because even in the way I'm witnessing you right now, there's anxiety building just thinking about it, going back to that moment. So at this moment in your story, at this juncture, what is the lesson that you think you would take away if we stopped the story right here? What is the aha moment that you want to share with the audience of the podcast at this stage?
Yeah, take the risk. That's it. Take the leap. I don't know. I feel like there's and I mean that in this, take the leap responsibly. But there was a certain amount of calling that I felt towards this path. And as much as it felt unnatural and like I was deviating from a path that I had been on, I felt like it was now or never. And if you ever find yourself in that moment, now or never, I need to either take this gamble or I'll regret it for the rest of my life. You need to do that thing. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's pursuing a job or a relationship or a passion, a hobby, whatever, or going on a vacation, taking a trip, just do it.
So take the risk, fight through the anxiety, fight through the inner monologue that's telling you to do something differently. But surprise, surprise, the story doesn't end there. And Dan Hacker, a.k.a. Muzzy Bear, working the creative side of your spirit, makes another change, and a decade in says, okay, the risk is over. What happened?
So it's funny that you say like the anxiety goes all the way back to the initial taking of the leap. And I think that it's a very anxiety driven lifestyle. You have to be able to function under a lot of pressure when you're pursuing anything creative. I'm very lucky. My family, they were always there to kind of catch me when I fall, but there was not like a safety net in the sense that I could fail at this thing and I'll just go run the family business. It's no big deal, right?
Right. You still had to make a living somewhere.
I had to make a living somewhere. And there was always that kind of like, there is no backup plan. This is the only option. I'm just doing music and it's going so great. And I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And I'm going to be touring until I'm Bob Weir playing at Las Vegas Sphere singing when I'm 85 years old.
By the way, I would be there in the front row watching you. If that's what happens, I'm there.
You'd be backstage. You'd be on the guest list. And I kind of, I think this was 2017, 2018, like started having these debilitating panic attacks, like really bad. I couldn't, when I was on stage, it felt like I was in the crowd with the camera watching myself. Like I had these out of body experiences, not positive, like very negative. And I started to kind of mentally break down and I started going to therapy, started doing the work. And it took a lot of years, and fundamentally, the way that I saw the world fundamentally changed because I really addressed some of the anxieties that I had when I was 18 years old and going on this path in the first place. Pandemic rolls around, and I'm still kind of having this just like overwhelming feeling that the stress and the frustration and the continued moving of the goalpost where I'm trying to throw the dice a little bit further. I don't know if this metaphor works, but I felt like no matter how hard we were working, no matter how far I was getting personally, you know, because I'm working with Grizz, but I'm also doing my own stuff on the side. And there's a whole complexity in the parallels of playing sold out Red Rock show and then having a 200-person bar show the next day. But yeah, I kind of just realized that I was running myself ragged. And when you forced to slow down with the pandemic and I'm at home and I'm just staying in one place for a year for the first time in 10 years, I realized that there was a different path because throughout that whole process, I'm connecting with people and I'm realizing, oh, like sharing the experience and having conversations like this where we're able to talk to each other one-on-one and kind of get deep. That's, I think, really what I'm after, and being able to go to all these places through music and connect with tons of people on this big level, but then have this shared experience where someone can come up to me and say, oh, I saw you at that concert. I was going through a lot at this time in my life, and I was having, you know, I was dealing with this grief. I lost a friend or a family member, and your show really changed, like uplifted me in a time when I needed it. And my response was not always, I mean, it was always, thank you so much. That's such a nice thing to say, but could you tell me more, a little bit more about that? What is that feeling like? Meanwhile, I'm in therapy and I'm at home now and I'm on the internet. I was like streaming video games and streaming, making music and having more conversations, more and more conversations of these one-on-one variety, like one-on-one nature, talking with people. And I kind of realized like, I think I want to go back to school and be a therapist.
So I'm listening to you tell the story.
Yeah.
You are at the top of your game. You're creative. You're building music. You're building connections. You're killing it on the road. And at the same time, your anxiety's ramping up again.
Oh, yeah.
And now as you told the story to us today, I sensed that anxiety sort of falling away and a peaceful calm was coming over you. That was happening obviously physically as you made this transition away from that creative world back to maybe what your family was telling you should have been doing all along. So I'm going to ask you again.
Yeah.
At this stage in the story, now going back to school for a social work degree, what is the takeaway? The first one, if you remember, was take the risk.
Yeah.
What's the takeaway?
Ooh. I think if the first one is take the risk and take the leap, I think the second one, the second turning point, which is also the same as the first one, but ultimately it's kind of realizing trust your gut. And not even your gut, because it was like a spiritual, on a spiritual level, I felt called towards this new path as well. So I think that, again, it's like know how to recognize the signs because your body will be telling you and reality will be showing you, kind of pointing you the way. I think you get signs in your life that things point you towards.
It's very interesting to hear you say this because in the first half of the story, the take the risk is sort of ignoring or leaning into the discomfort.
Yeah.
And as you've made this change back into maybe a more traditional career path, it is allowing that anxiety to sort of direct you to be the healthiest version of yourself. So the first half is aggressively go against the anxiety and figure it out. And the second half is allow the spirit of your soul to sort of define who you are until you settle into what feels great. And what feels great to you, we've always known. It's the deep human connection that you were finding back at Temple Israel on youth group retreats. It was sitting around the campfire with a guitar and talking to your friends. And here you are on your way to finishing a degree and getting into the therapeutic world. It's really amazing. It's a real blessing.
I feel that way. Yeah. It's funny. I went and saw the new movie Inside Out 2 the other night. And it's so ironic and coincidental, and maybe you planned this. I don't know if you saw the movie over the weekend too, but the beginning of the movie is the introduction of anxiety. The main character is 13, but let's just pretend that for me, I started experiencing anxiety 17.
Or how about 30?
Right.
30-year-old anxiety.
Right. I mean, it never goes away, but that's exactly the lesson of the movie, is that at a certain point in your life, more complex things take control. Anxiety is programming you, well, I have these cool new friends and I'm going to act a certain way to keep them, stay in their good graces and do the things that they want of me. I'm going to drive an hour in the middle of the night to go work on music for 2 hours to drive back because it feels like the right thing to do. And who's to say it was the wrong thing because it ended up leading to this career and blah, blah, blah. But at a certain point in the movie, there's this turning point where the old emotions, which are just joy, anger, disgust, and concern or worry and sadness, right? And then the new emotions, anxiety and embarrassment and envy and all of this stuff, the whole movie is their friction. But the end of the movie, and there's this whole thing about the sense of self, and in the beginning, the girls, I'm totally spoiling this movie, but you should still go see it anyway. The girl's sense of self is, I'm a good person. And then when anxiety takes over, it's, I'm not good enough. And then at the end of the movie, it becomes this amalgamation of everything where all of the emotions are working together in harmony, and you realize how to function with anxiety at certain points, with fear and doubt and concern, but still with joy and still with excitement and still with disgust or envy and still with love, and learning that it really is about mashing these emotions together and letting certain ones take the lead at certain times.
Right. It's the evolution of our soul to be able to access all of those pieces of who we are.
Yeah, and having that sense of self to realize when is the good emotions, when are the things that feel genuine and natural and you're just trusting your gut, and when are the things, when are external factors really influencing the decisions you're making and the things that you're doing.
And I will tell you, as somebody who's been watching you through both careers, I see that you have certainly come to that place now that it feels like you're a more authentic, full version of yourself. And I'll share with everybody who's listening, I know that personally because the music that we're using on this podcast is your music. And what that means is you are still accessing that creative, anxious, wonderful other piece of you, along with the beautiful, soulful, therapeutic,
still anxious
personality. I love it, and I'm so thankful for you. I'm thankful for your talent, for your music, and now I'm really excited to be thankful for your guidance for people who will need you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm grateful to have had you as a source of guidance in my youth, and you always kind of like fostered this individuality within me. So thank you. And I'm so glad that we can continue to stay close and maybe closer now than ever. And that feels great. So thank you.
Amazing. So as you know, although you already told us about a movie you've watched recently, I ask everybody on the show at the end of the show if there's something you're watching, reading, or connecting to right now that you want to share beyond the Inside Out 2 movie. Is there something you're reading or watching?
Yeah. Well, I just saw that movie. It was great. Would recommend, especially to anybody who's going into the world of therapy. But I'm reading this book. It's by a Japanese author named Haruki Murakami. I can only describe him to people as kind of like a Vonnegut-esque, writes stories within stories where the events of the plot are kind of loose, but the prose and the things that he writes about and his characters' experiences are so real and human and amazing. And I'm reading this book called Colorless Tsukuru Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. And it's just a book about a guy who is probably around my age, going through a serious time in his life where he's losing a bunch of childhood friends and losing his way. And I guess I'm still reading the book. It's really good, but I guess he finds his way.
It sounds autobiographical at some level for what we've talked about today, right? Finding your way, losing your way, finding your way again.
Yeah.
It is such an important lesson to take those risks and then follow your intuition and figure out a way to really wake up to life. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast. So, Dan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So today we had Dan Hacker, a.k.a. Muzzy Bear, and he shared with us a little bit about his perspective on his own path. But I think it's something that everybody can understand as you go through these next few days, weeks, and months in your own lives. So looking forward to hearing from everybody in between shows. And if you are able to watch or listen in the future, we're excited to have you. Until next time, continue to wake up to life. L'chaim.